All right, here we go. It is another Monday, starting fresh and just trying to keep things together. We have a new individual who will be starting today that will hopefully help to bail us out of some of the crappy chaos that we're experiencing. And if not, then spaghetti-o, I suppose. But I'm pretty confident that it'll be a good thing. I watched a documentary yesterday on Gene Wilder, and I do think that Gene Wilder's pretty funny. It gave me a couple of other movies to maybe watch with him in it. For one, I don't know that I've ever seen Young Frankenstein in its entirety, and so I'll have to figure out the means to watch that. But I know him from Willy Wonka. He does a great job in Willy Wonka. I know him from Blazing Saddles. He does a great job in Blazing Saddles. And I remember when I was a kid in probably elementary school, honestly, we watched The Little Prince, and I'm pretty sure he's in that too. And they didn't talk about it much in the biography. They just kind of brushed over it. But I think I want to watch that movie. And then the first movie that he was in, that was also a Mel Brooks movie, I'll probably watch. And then after that, it seemed like he got a bunch of kind of weird, wacky roles. And he teamed up with Richard Pryor a lot, which I don't really know anything about him. So, but I don't know, they talked about, it was interesting. I liked the way they formatted the biography, honestly, because they talked about his life, they talked about his films, they talked about him. And I really wish that, at least with actors, that people would be able to do that a little more often. They hit the high notes. They didn't cover every movie he was in, but they talked in decent detail about the films that he was in. And, some of the dialogue was him, some of the dialogue was other people. And it was just really well put together in my mind. I feel like a lot of biographies focus too much on a singular thing, and you don't get a full picture of who the person really was. And I feel like this biography, I got a full picture of who Gene Wilder was, and I think it was a really good, well put together biography. And so by that notion, I really enjoyed the show. I really enjoyed Gene Wilder's work and what I've seen him in anyway. So, like I said, it made me just want to watch some more of his stuff. But I really, anytime I watch these biographies, it just inspires me. It's I want to be the kind of person that when it's my time, somebody wants to make a biography of me. And that would be the ultimate thing. I could very easily write my own biography or make my own biography for that matter. But that's not what I want. I want to inspire people enough to where somebody else goes out of their way to make a biography of me. That to me is one of the ultimate forms of flattery, and one way that you know you've done something that will last in this world, because I don't know the logic behind it. I just know that it feels good to have a biography made after you and after the body of work that you leave behind. And it tackles this kind of idea of why man or humans have this obsession with leaving something behind. And I don't know that it is a pursuit that largely encompasses women. I do know some women that are like that, and I do know some, but I feel like most women I know could care less. But a lot of the men that I know are very much so obsessed with leaving something behind. They want to do more than just exist in this world and die and be forgotten. They want, and like, depending on what you leave behind, you are doomed to be forgotten. Like, my brother builds houses, and I'm not popping shots at that by any means, but that's like his thing to leave behind, because a house can stand for hundreds of years, really, and like, unless somebody for whatever reason wants to tear the thing down, it should be there for a while. But the thing that gets me with that is very few people are going to know who built that. Like, he'll know, and his immediate family will know, but will his grandchildren know? Will the generation after them know? Like, eventually that information gets lost, and then it's just something that he left behind in this world, but we don't really know who left it behind. And the same cannot be said for proper works of art, because proper works of art generally almost always have someone's name tied exclusively to it. My name is tied to every book that I write. My name is tied to every episode of Compression Man. My name is tied to every work that I put out there. And so with that under consideration, like, there is no piece of work that I can put out that will be forgotten by the world because my name is all over it. You just look at famous composers. Beethoven was writing symphonies hundreds of years ago, and still to this day, most anyone who knows music knows who Beethoven is, because he is just that worldly famous and synonymous with music. And I don't think that I'll be that much of a name that, like, I transcend time itself. Like, I look at Michael Jackson a lot. He's still very relevant in today's society, but that is because, like, the generation that grew up listening to him is still alive and kicking. And, like, what happens 40 years from now, when the 80s is 80 years ago, will he still be as relevant as he is today? Like, for some reason, the 80s has this magnetism about it. And I've been talking to a lot of people about it, but, like, decades in American history, some of them really stick and some of them really don't. And I feel like the 50s is a big decade that a lot of people come back to. The 80s is a big decade that a lot of people come back to. And I guess that's really kind of it. I don't know that anybody goes below the 50s, and I don't know that anybody really, they're definitely not visiting the 2000s yet. I feel like the magical window of time, if you will, is like a 30-year window. When a certain decade gets to be 30 years old, that tends to be when people start referencing back to it. I've wanted for some time to get ahead of the trend and start making stuff about the 2000s and start making content that happens in the 2000s. Because the 2000s is 20 years old this decade. And so there's no sense in waiting until 2030 to start making content about the 2000s when you can do it now. And that is what I consider to be rather interesting about the whole thing. But in reality, I don't know just how the whole thing will come about. Like, why certain decades stick around, certain decades don't. I feel like the 70s had a flash in the pan comeback in the 2000s. Like, I feel like Napoleon Dynamite was, well, no, I think it was set in the 80s because of music that they chose and stuff. But I feel like there was a flash in the pan resurgence of the 70s, and then it went away almost as soon as it became a thing. And the 80s hit hard in the 2010s, and it hasn't really died down. Like, I think Stranger Things is really what helped propel the 80s back into the limelight. There was a lot of shows going back to the 80s in the 2010s. And like I said, it was that magical 30 years ago. It was 3 decades out. And now it's 4 decades out. And I'm thinking now that it's more just like the trend hasn't died yet. And that's why people are still going back to the 80s. But to the same end, like, it seems like an infinitely iconic decade that a lot of people are coming back to. And there is just a lot of style and a lot of unique authenticity about that decade that people tend to appeal to. But kind of going back to what I was saying with Michael Jackson, like, when the people who can remember that time excuse me, are no longer around, will his music, will his impact on the industry remain? Like, they're already telling stories about people dethroning him in X, Y, and Z, but the problem is a lot of those titles, like the King of Pop and stuff, they're not held together by any merit. It's just something that the world recognizes. And at what point in time do they stop recognizing Michael Jackson as the King of Pop and they start recognizing somebody else? And that's what's kind of wonderful about it, is there's, like, my generation, the millennial generation, is still very familiar with his music and with his works, but we did not grow up on his music and works. And, well, I mean, we probably did it our own way. Like, our parents grew up on it when it was new, and then they grew us up on it, listening to it when we were children. And just seeing for how long it remains relevant and important to the world. And that's what's interesting to me, is also understanding the relevance and the importance and how it maintains. Like I said, it'll just be an interesting world 30, 40 years from now when most of the people who grew up on his content are either elderly or gone. How relevant will he still be in society at that point? And I don't know. Certain pieces of work people like to believe are timeless, and I'm not sure that I believe his work is timeless. I mean, I'm biased to the topic. He's my favorite musician, so of course I think his work is timeless. But from a global standpoint, do I think that he'll be around forever? Will he be on the radio waves forever? I don't know. You look at the 50s and the 60s, and even to some degree the 70s, and there's not a whole lot of radio play going on in those decades right now, unless they are like specially for those decades. Like, you go on XM and you can find whatever you want. You go on internet radio and you can find whatever you want. But as far as like broadcast radio, FM radio is concerned, like, no, I don't know of any local 50s stations, local 60s stations, local 70s stations. 80s, yes, you can still get plenty of 80s out there. 90s, yes. 2000s, not so much. It depends on kind of what kind of 2000s you're looking for. But understanding the staying power of any given piece of art, and a lot of it has to do with the amount of people that you've touched. The amount of people that you touch, the greater your chances are of expanding to something relevant in the world. And like, he was hugely popular worldwide, and I always go back to this. He was so popular that like things that he was doing was making the news. Like, the world news was talking about the new dance move that he did, or the new song that he wrote, or whatever. And like, back then the world stood still for artwork, great pieces of artwork, and the world would stand still for that. That doesn't really happen anymore. The closest thing I think we have to that is Adele, and whenever she releases something, the whole world stands still. And I think about the most recent album she did, 31, and celebrities all around the world got a private performance at this beautiful venue of Adele performing her album. And we peons, piddly little folk, got to watch it streaming on whatever streaming platform we watched it on. And it's interesting that, like, these people who are all considered to be the best in their respective fields got to watch Adele perform live at this special venue. It's like all these people who are considered to be the best in their respective fields stopped what they were doing, stopped their presumably very busy lives to go and watch her. And we don't have many pieces of art that's like that anymore, or artists creating pieces of art that is revered in that way. And it's both sad and a sign of the times. I think the internet has flooded the world with art, and now you have to stick out both as an artist and a person in order to make your way in this world, because just creating music anymore isn't special. Like back in the day, it felt like a special thing. You didn't know very many people who could make music, and now that it's more popular, the internet is showing you the entire world, you realize how not necessarily rare that skill set is, and now you have to stick out in a whole multitude of ways. But at any rate, I feel like this was a pretty healthy conversation for a Monday morning, talking about the impact of art and how you can have an impact on people and maintain an impact, and I hope you enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty fruitful. Have a good one.